Welcome to the Horror Story channel, where nightmares come to life. Join us for spine-chilling stories of terror, creepy urban legends, and haunted places. If you're brave enough to face your deepest fears, hit the subscribe button for our latest horror stories. Without any delay, let's jump right into the story. The empty house. Emily's parents had left early that morning, rushing to catch their flight for a week-long business trip. Emily had been half asleep when they kissed her goodbye, their words muffled by the drowsiness that still clung to her mind. As she stumbled out of bed and made her way downstairs, she noticed the empty spots where their luggage had been sitting the night before. It wasn't unusual for her parents to travel for work, but this time, something felt off. Emily tried to quell the unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. She busied herself with making breakfast and cleaning up around the house, but her thoughts kept drifting back to her parents' absence. She tried calling their phones, but they either went straight to voicemail or were turned off. Emily's anxiety grew with each unanswered call, and she started to feel a sense of dread that refused to dissipate. "I'm being irrational," Emily muttered to herself, trying to sound more convincing than she felt. "They are probably just in a meeting or something." But even as she spoke the words, Emily knew they were hollow. She couldn't dispel the unease that something was wrong, that her parents were in danger. She tried distracting herself with her favorite horror novel, but her mind kept wandering, conjuring up images of her parents trapped in some unknown horror. Emily paced around the house, her heart racing as she checked every room for any signs of her parents' return. But the house remained stubbornly quiet, and Emily's anxiety began to turn into something more like fear. She didn't know what to do or who to turn to, and the thought of being alone in the house for an entire week sent a wave of apprehension through her. "Okay, Emily, you need to calm down," she told herself firmly. "You're being paranoid. Your parents are probably having a great time on their trip, and you're just overthinking things." But no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, Emily couldn't help but feel that something was very, very wrong. Emily had a gnawing sensation in the pit of her stomach that something was off about her neighbors, the Johnsons. Every time she caught a glimpse of them, she felt an unsettling aura surround them. They were always quiet, too quiet for comfort. Emily sensed that they were watching her every move, studying her like a hawk would its prey. One afternoon, Emily decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. As she strolled down the street, she noticed that the Johnsons' house was unusually still. Normally, Emily would hear the faint sound of a radio or the rustling of leaves as the Johnsons tended to their garden. But today, there was an eerie silence. Curiosity getting the better of her, Emily decided to investigate. She made her way to the Johnsons' yard and peered over the fence. She expected to see Mr. Johnson tending to his tomato plants or Mrs. Johnson knitting on the porch, but instead, there was no one to be seen. The yard was immaculately kept, the grass a perfect shade of green, and the flowers in full bloom, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air. Emily's mind raced with questions. Where were the Johnsons? What were they doing? Why was everything so quiet? As Emily pondered these questions, she noticed something peculiar on the ground. It was a small, black and white photo of a family she didn't recognize. The photo looked old, and the faces in it were hard to make out, but Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding wash over her. Suddenly, Emily heard the sound of the front door opening. She quickly hid behind a bush, hoping that whoever was coming out wouldn't spot her. Emily peeked out from her hiding spot and saw Mr. Johnson leaving the house. He didn't seem to notice Emily and made his way to his car. Emily followed him with her eyes, trying to catch a glimpse of where he was going, but he drove off too quickly. As Emily made her way back to her house, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. Emily turned around, but there was no one there. She tried to calm herself down, but the feeling of unease persisted. Emily wondered if the Johnsons were involved in her parents' disappearance. She decided to investigate further, but she knew that she had to be cautious. She couldn't let the Johnsons catch her snooping around their property. As Emily walked back into her house, she had a nagging suspicion that she was in danger. She knew that she had to tread carefully, but she was determined to uncover the truth about her neighbors, no matter what. Emily's heart was racing as she approached the shed in the Johnsons' backyard. It was a small, nondescript structure that looked like it hadn't been used in years. But Emily's instincts told her that there was something inside that shed, something that could hold the key to her parents' disappearance. As Emily tried the door, she found it was locked, but that didn't deter her. She was desperate for answers, and she knew that breaking in was her only option. She looked around, making sure that no one was watching, and then began to pry the lock open with a stick. When the lock finally gave way, Emily took a deep breath and slowly pushed the door open. The inside of the shed was dark, musty, and cramped. Emily couldn't see anything at first, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There, in the corner of the shed, were her parents' suitcases. Emily's heart sank as she realized that her worst fears had come true. Her parents weren't on a business trip. They were being held captive by the Johnsons. Emily's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. She couldn't believe that her quiet and unassuming neighbors were capable of something so horrific. But as she looked closer, she saw something else that made her even more uneasy. On a nearby shelf, Emily saw her parents' cell phones, their screens cracked and broken. Emily knew that her parents would never go anywhere without their phones, and the fact that they were here only confirmed her suspicions. As Emily pieced together the evidence, she felt a mix of fear and anger. She had to save her parents, no matter what it took. But first, she needed to get out of the shed and call for help. She turned to leave, but as she did, she heard a noise behind her. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know if it was the Johnsons or something else, but she knew that she had to get out of there fast. She turned around, ready to run, but there was no one there. Emily breathed a sigh of relief and quickly made her way back to her house. But as she ran, she couldn't help but wonder what other horrors the Johnsons were capable of. Emily knew that she was in for a fight, but she was determined to save her parents, no matter what the cost. Emily's heart was pounding as she stood face to face with the Johnsons. She couldn't believe what she had just seen in the shed. Her parents' belongings were strewn all over the place, and she knew that the Johnsons were responsible for their disappearance. Emily demanded to know where her parents were, but the Johnsons just stared back at her with cold, dead eyes. "You can't keep them here," Emily said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "They are innocent, and they don't deserve this." The Johnsons remained silent, their expressions unchanged. Emily felt a surge of frustration and helplessness wash over her. She knew that she had to act fast if she wanted to save her parents. Emily tried to run, but the Johnsons caught her before she could make it to the door. "You're not going anywhere," Mr. Johnson growled. "Your parents must be punished for their sins. They won't be released until they've repented." Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. She knew that the Johnsons were serious and that they wouldn't hesitate to harm her or her parents. Emily tried to reason with them, but her words fell on deaf ears. "You're crazy," Emily said. "You can't just kidnap people and hold them against their will. It's against the law." "The law?" Mrs. Johnson scoffed. "The law can't save you from the judgment of God. Your parents have strayed from the path of righteousness, and they must pay the price." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that the Johnsons truly believed what they were saying. They were fanatics, blinded by their beliefs and willing to do anything to enforce them. Emily knew that she was in grave danger and that she had to come up with a plan. As she searched for a way out, Emily remembered a story she had read about a girl who had escaped from her kidnappers by pretending to go along with their demands. Emily decided to try the same tactic. She feigned repentance and begged the Johnsons to release her parents. "I'll do whatever it takes," Emily said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please, just let my parents go. I'll do anything." The Johnsons looked at each other, and Emily could see a flicker of doubt in their eyes. For a moment, she thought that she might have succeeded. But then, Mr. Johnson shook his head. "It's too late for that," he said. "Your parents have already been judged. They'll be punished, just like we were punished for our sins." Emily's heart sank as she realized that her plan had failed. She knew that she had to find another way out, but she was running out of time. The Johnsons were closing in on her, their expressions twisted with anger and hatred. Emily took a deep breath and braced herself for what was to come. Emily's heart raced as she and the police officers approached the Johnsons' property. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting an eerie shadow over the house. Emily's mind raced as she thought about what her parents could be going through in the Johnsons' basement. As they approached the house, Emily had a faint sound coming from the basement window. It sounded like someone was tapping on the glass. Emily crept closer to the window and saw her parents' faces pressed against the glass. They looked pale and terrified, but when they saw Emily, their faces lit up with hope. Emily motioned to the police officers, and they quickly moved to surround the house. As they approached the front door, they heard the sound of the Johnsons shuffling around inside. The officers kicked the door open, and they rushed inside. The inside of the house was dimly lit, but Emily could see the Johnsons standing in the middle of the room. They were dressed in dark robes, and their eyes glowed in the darkness. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, realizing that these people were not just strange neighbors, but were something far more sinister. The Johnsons started to chant in a language that Emily didn't recognize. Emily tried to make sense of what was happening, but she couldn't understand what they were saying. Emily's mind raced as she realized that the situation was much more dangerous than she had anticipated. Suddenly, one of the officers lunged at the Johnsons, and a violent struggle ensued. Emily's heart raced as she watched the chaos unfold. She couldn't believe that she was in the middle of a real-life horror story. Emily spotted an opportunity to rescue her parents, and she made a break for the basement. As she descended the stairs, she could hear her parents crying out in desperation. Emily felt a sense of urgency and determination, knowing that her parents' lives were on the line. When Emily reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw her parents chained to the wall. They were battered and bruised, but when they saw Emily, their faces lit up with hope. Emily quickly freed her parents, and they hugged each other tightly. As they made their way back up the stairs, they could hear the sounds of the struggle upstairs. Emily realized that they were running out of time, and she knew that they had to get out of the house as quickly as possible. When they reached the top of the stairs, Emily saw that the struggle had intensified. One of the officers was lying on the ground, and the Johnsons were advancing towards them. Emily felt a surge of fear and determination, knowing that they had to fight for their survival. Emily and her parents charged at the Johnsons, and a violent struggle ensued. Emily could hear the sounds of glass shattering and wood splintering as the fight intensified. The Johnsons were powerful, but Emily and her family were determined to survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Johnsons lay still on the ground. Emily and her family were exhausted but relieved that the nightmare was finally over. As they made their way out of the house, Emily realized that life would never be the same again. She had faced the unimaginable, and she knew that she would carry the scars of the experience with her for the rest of her life. But at least she and her family had survived, and that was all that mattered. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching my horror story videos. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and leave a comment below to let me know what you thought. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Your support helps the channel grow and allows me to keep creating new content. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next video.